You're watching The Sports Objective, the podcast for Pirates. You're listening to Absolute Empowerment with Coach Jeff Connors on The Sports Objective. Join Coach C, a USA Strength and Conditioning Hall of Famer, every Monday night as he and a variety of guests, including former players, former and current coaches, pastors, and others will discuss relevant issues in coaching today's athlete, with the goal of equipping the athlete and those coaching them with the physical, mental, and spiritual armor necessary to live their best life. Here's Coach Connors.
Welcome to Absolute Empowerment. Tonight we have a very special guest, seasoned strength and conditioning veteran, Bob Alejo. And Bob was most recently a Senior Associate AD for Performance and Student Athlete Welfare at Cal State Northridge. He has a very vast background in the profession, ran the programs at Cal State Chico, UCLA, UC San Bernardino. Also coached an Olympic gold medal beach volleyball team. Was also the director of strength and conditioning with the Oakland A's. Assistant AD for strength and conditioning at NC State. And also directed the sports science department for the company Powerlift. And Bob has also recently been named onto the board of directors for the National Strength and Conditioning Association. And Coach, so glad to have you in the house to discuss some important issues. And we're really glad to see you.
Well, man, I'm looking forward to it. It's great to see you, Coach. I mean, it's in North Carolina, holds a real dear place in my heart, and it was a shame the only time I got to meet you is when we had those early season basketball scrimmages. I could run over to the gym for a minute, and if I was lucky, I caught a hold of you. But no, this is definitely an honor, and these are the kind of things that folks like you and I who've been around a little bit should do, right? I mean, let people know what we've done, what we've seen, and no theories here, Coach, right?
And no doubt. Well, Bob, what we usually do on the show is this is kind of like somewhat of the Bob Alejo story. So we want to, first of all, talk a little bit about young Bob Alejo, where you grew up, a little bit about your, of course, athletic background, and also if you have any kind of any kind of testimony of faith, some things that you overcame in being successful as a young athlete, and maybe a little bit about who your influences were growing up and how important they were. And we're just really interested in your story.
Well, shoot, I'm not a big fan about talking about myself, but I can definitely, this is good because then you get to go all the way back to the beginning, right? So I was born and raised in Sacramento, California, like my mom and dad were, and my grandparents, and everybody is still back there. Those who are continuing to breathe. My mom's still alive and healthy as a horse. I tell her, Mom, she's 86, 87, and Mom, you're screwing up my inheritance. Let's go. Like she's in too good a shape. So, of course, she laughs. She's full of the business, just like I am. So, grew up there, then moved to the Bay Area and spent, most of my childhood years in the Contra Costa County, which is, just east of San Francisco and Oakland. And so, I was a 3-sport player back then, my freshman year, and then got it down to 2 sports for my sophomore, junior, and senior year. And baseball was primarily the sport that I got the most notoriety in, but ironically, I really liked football. I thought, that's really what I wanted to do, but I just didn't have the size, and although I could have went to a smaller school and probably done that, but baseball was really where I excelled. From there, I went to California State University, Chico, and went to a Division II school and played baseball there, which was fantastic for me. I was up the road about 3 odd hours from where I live. So it was just far enough away from home to be on your own, but close enough if you needed to get back. And what an experience that was. I mean, I had a ton of fun there, but, I did pretty good. So I ended up at some point getting into the school's Hall of Fame, the inaugural Baseball Hall of Fame, and then what they call, what is this? I'm looking at it right now, Legends of the Diamond. So there's been baseball has been played there in the minor league level, and other people have been there in town. That's more of a Chico thing. So that worked out fine, and loved school. It was more of you talk to people that went to school there, they tell you it was an experience more than anything. It was up in the mountains, and so we had plenty of fishing and hunting going on, which was just a blast. And from there, ended up getting my first job at UCLA in 1984 with John Arce. So that was, really, he really showed me the way. Before I got there, though, Jeff, I'll tell you where my inspiration really came from. First of all, Chico State at the time had some tremendous physical educators. I mean, it's a liberal arts school. A lot of teachers coming out of there, but there's also a lot of farmers, and there's at least 10 guys I played with in baseball that are farming or own their own farms up there right now and ranching rice and corn and grain and all that. But really learned a lot about physical education. It was small. Of course, back then, as you know, there was no sports science. There was no, strength and conditioning tract of education. I was a biology major looking to go into physical therapy, and as luck would have it, and I guess luck's a bad term, I don't really believe in happenstance, but during the springtime, I couldn't take any biology courses because the labs were 3 hours and 3 times a week. And, I'd have missed a lot of school. So I ended up declaring a second major as physical education and then did that. So by the time came to graduate, I needed, what did I need? 2 physics and a chemistry. But that would have taken a whole nother year because I certainly wasn't going to take the physics, 2 physics at a time. But then I thought to myself, like, golly, but I could graduate with a BA in PE. So I did right away. Right away, I did that. And in the meantime, I'm looking for a place to work out because I was began to competitively Olympic lift and looking for a place to work out or whatever, and found this place called the Sports Medicine Center, and signed up. Looked over to the right and saw a hiring sign. So I said, "What hiring for what?" Well, instructors and whatever. So I thought, well, man, that'd be a good way to earn money. I'm just out of college, and place is really inexpensive to live. And shoot, before I came to Chico, I worked at a Jack LaLanne's. Talk about, hey, let me tell you something. You talk about a money-making machine. They were printing money in the back of that place. Golly, Jack LaLanne had it down. He could afford it a lot more than that onesie he used to wear. I can tell you that much. But I felt like, okay, well, I can do that. I can teach people how to work out. I mean, that ain't no big deal. So that was kind of it, and grew that position into the assistant director of the place there, and then in 1984, I got a shot at going to LA, walking my resume. Nobody does this anymore. Walking my resume into the UCLA weight room and saying, "Hi, I'm Bob Alejo. Here's my resume. If you have an opening." John said, I don't. But they've talked to me a lot about having an assistant, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So I leave. 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a phone call. Now, for folks at home who don't look like me and you with a little gray coming out, no cell phones, no caller ID, no computer, no nothing. Phone rings. Hello? Hey, this is John Arce at UCLA. Looks like I've been given an assistant's position. And it's $10,000 for a 9-month appointment. I said, I'll take it. Off I went, like most of us, barely making $1, but loving every second of it, right? Yeah. So that began. I mean, that was really, the beginning of a 10-year stay at UCLA and the beginning of the career. Just before I decided to drop that resume off, I'd interviewed at this will take you back. I interviewed with Joe Cap at Cal when he had that job because it was only a couple hours away. So I knew a guy who knew a guy, got in there, and that was a hell of a deal. But we had a guy by the name of Jeff Stover, who was a 70-foot shot putter back in the early 80s. And he had played high school football up out of Chico at a place called Willows. The graduating class was probably 50. I mean, it was really small up there up north. And he was going to throw again in the Masters. There's a couple other throws in there that were older where they're still throwing. And somehow, I don't know how it happened, but the 49ers got a hold of who he was. He was 275, strong as hell, lean. I mean, just you couldn't imagine. Well, as the story goes, they came up there to Chico, which wasn't far from the center California. He ran a 40 at about 4.5, 6'5", 6'6", 275. Stopped the tryout, signed him, and then continued the tryout. So he goes to camp in Rockland, which is only an hour and a half away from Chico. So we go down to Rockland, and who would be the strength coach of the 49ers during that time was Al Vermeil. Now, I didn't know anything about Al Vermeil. I mean, I'd heard about him. But again, it wasn't on the internet because there was no internet. So you bought a book or you heard from somebody, right? So I go watch Al Vermeil for a couple of days. Well, I remember distinctly driving home in the car with the guys, and I end up saying, like, because I was coaching a little bit. I coached the football team and, trying to feel myself out. I also coached baseball. Found out that really wasn't going to happen for me. But I remember driving home and thinking to myself, and I said it out loud too, if I can look and feel like that every day at work, I want to do that. And that was the beginning. I thank Al for that all the time, every time I see him.
Yeah.
And so that started out. I spent 10 years at UCLA. 1993, I went to the Oakland A's for almost 10, I think. And was part of the Moneyball era where, we started out and we were horrible. We almost lost 100 games twice. And if you looked at our record as it got into the late 90s and early 2000s, we won more and won more and won more and got really good and really set the record for baseball in the modern era in the second half. And I don't think anybody's had a second half like that since we did that then or before. So they made a movie out of that, and I'm proud of that and proud of what we did. And of course, that too was Billy Beane. And if anybody watches this and knows about data and metrics and all that, he was the one who started all that. So I was there watching the whole big data era explode under what they used. And then from there, I went with Jason Giambi to the Yankees for about 4 years and decided I wanted to do my own thing. So I became, his personal coach up there and wrote a book and got a website. And I was, in the middle of, I was on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I was single. Couldn't have had a more fun time. I'm still recovering from that. That was 2002 to 2005. Still tired from all that. It was fun, though. It was good. And then that's when I took my job at, I think you said San Bernardino, but that would be Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And went there for 4 years. Then Billy Beane called me back, said, I want you to come back here and fix this thing. We're not doing very well. So I came back for about in the third year of my 3-year deal. NC State popped up on the radar, and I got offered the director of everything, including football, and an assistant athletic director title. And I thought that would be good for the future. So I took that. Was there for about 6 years. And then I ended up here at Northridge as a senior associate athletic director for performance and student athlete welfare, which, I've been stumping for a long time. I mean, I think that we can talk about this later, but, the supervision and oversight of strength and conditioning, athletic training, and all that stuff is just awful at the college level. I mean, they don't come in and watch. I don't know about you, but the guys that were have my oversight over me, they never saw me work one day. Nothing that was other than coming in and getting coffee out of my room because I had the coffee maker. But they were watching. They didn't sit around and see what we did and how we did it, and yet they're still filling out employee evaluations and for an official institutional document, sight unseen. Ridiculous. So I was glad to be able to do that. Mike Izzy, the guy, one of the first guys I met on campus at UCLA in 1984, who just finished up as a decathlete, became the AD, and he said, "Come on, let's do this." And he decided to go another route last June, and the new AD came in and thought that there was 3 senior positions that he was going to change and reorganize. And sadly, it wasn't one of those things, Jeff, where, he's going to bring in his own people. He dissolved my position.
Yeah.
So now, like every other place, the person that has 3 teams and Title IX and 2 events is also going to cover that whole performance unit, which is to say they won't do anything.
Yeah.
They won't do a damn thing. So I got to see 2008. I was lucky to run into Todd Rogers and Phil Dalhouser, and they asked me to coach them, and then they put me on the roster. So I was an official team member at that point. So I don't think there's been a strength coach that's ever been an official U.S. Olympic team member, but I was there twice. So I also went with them in London where we weren't as lucky, but we ended up bringing home the gold in Beijing. That's a whole different experience, man. That's the way I explain it is, it's one thing to win a national championship, but when you win the world, that's a whole different deal. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And, I all in all, just like you, brother, same thing. My intent is to help people get better and help them any way I can to achieve their dreams. When you want to be the greatest volleyball player or golfer or football player ever lived, or you just want to have a great experience and go hard, and I can do that for you too. So, I mean, that's really been our mission, right?
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Now, you played catcher, right?
Yep, I did.
Okay. Yeah.
Undersized. Just a little dude.
My father and I played, we played at the same university. I played football. He played football and baseball, but my father was a catcher, and he signed a little deal with the Pirates with some farm league, but they sent him some god awful city. And I don't even know where it was, but he ended up coming back home. But yeah, my dad must have caught like a gazillion games. I mean, I was 5 years old still watching him catch, So
Wow. That's funny. I was able to watch my dad play too. In Sacramento, they don't have it anymore, but they used to have the Mexican American League.
yeah.
The valley there is, rife with, Spanish speaking people, let alone Mexicans who work in the fields, but I used to watch my uncles and my godfather play, and those games I remember watching them play thinking, wow, that's cool. I mean, it was just like anything else ever since. And now when I look back, the environment was like a big league game. I mean, these cats were playing hard, man. They weren't messing around because they were going to see each other in town, so they wanted to carry that around. So that was fun for me to be able to watch. I vividly remember that too. And, although sometimes I forget until, you bring up something like that. I'm like, damn, I do remember sitting next to my mom and watching that, like, wow, what's going on here?
Well, let's go back a few decades and, just tell me a little bit about the primary tenets of your program. And, I am interested in, because it's been a while when you were with the A's to, kind of what you were doing with them also, were you incorporating any of the Olympic lifts were with them at that time? Give me a little insight there.
All right. Well, I mean, look, I guess if you were to say, what did I gravitate to, the most, if I was to pick something out, it would be the Olympic lifts for sure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think you quickly understand that you just want to, as a strength and conditioning coach, what you're trying to do is prescribe training for an athlete in terms of what they need. So it's not so much the sport as what do you need. And so that, I think that's been my key. One of the things that I kind of pride myself in is I'm not an Olympic lifting guy or a powerlifting guy or a bodybuilding guy or a, whatever the hell you want to call it. I'm not that. I'm the guy that gets you better. Whatever that is, that's what I do. It just so happens that somebody like me and you got a pretty damn big toolbox because we've been doing this a long time, right? So and sometimes we end up doing stuff we haven't done for years, but we've done it and it worked, and gee, it would work for this woman or this man right here. Let's just do that and see how we get there. So, like I said, I got that call to go to baseball, and frankly, I mean, maybe this would be some sort of advice for younger coaches who come in. I literally just watched, because I think you need to watch to get an historical perspective of what these people have done. And, you got to realize that these are big leaguers, right? So they're the CEO of themselves. They're their own company making a lot of money. And so you have to think about it in those terms at the same time. And people say, hey, what do you like better? And I didn't like anything better. It just so happened I played baseball. That worked out for me. But I liked them both. I mean, I like the profession. It just so happens that, people say, oh, you're a baseball guy. No, I'm a strength coach that did baseball. Like you, I've done them all, right? So it's no big deal. At the same time, I say, but there is a difference. And the difference is, one, you're dealing with adults, and the other one, you're dealing with kids. Now, that's a difference, right? Yeah. There's certainly some things and behavior that you would perhaps try to use to motivate or persuade kids that you just can't do with grown-ups, and vice versa, right? So that was different. So I just basically watched, and sooner or later, they were asking me for help. Now these guys weren't doing, crazy stuff, but keep in mind, 1993, I was the first strength coach in Oakland A's history, and not every team in the big leagues in 93 had a strength coach. And there were some strength coaches that only worked 81 times a year. That means they only worked home games, didn't travel, but there was, so, it was really the vision of Sandy Alderson, who was the GM and president at the time, and eventually became the vice president of baseball and did the same job at the Padres and the Mets, to be able to say, hey, we need to get, and this is what they told me. We all sat down, and Sandy said they just had kind of an injury-plagued year and hadn't won the World Series since '89, hadn't even been in the playoffs for a few years, and said, we need to get somebody who's a professional at this. I know we're doing a good job lifting. Dave McKay was the guy kind of handling it. He was the first base coach. He's still in the big leagues coaching. They said, we got to get somebody like that. And so I was doing some work with the Lakers, Gary Vitti, through Gary Vitti, trying to help him out and get getting some of their guys in good shape. And Barry Weinberg, the Oakland A's trader, called him and said, hey, do you got anybody? And any strength coach said, no, we don't have a strength coach. We have a guy who's helping us out, who's works with UCLA basketball and runs all those sports. So again, another kind of historical measure. I'm pretty sure that UCLA was the first school that split the Olympic sports in football. So when John and when I was his assistant, they wanted to keep me there, and they said, here's what we'll do. We'll give John football, and then you can have the rest of the sports and be the administrator of the room. So you're no longer an assistant. So Gary was saying, he said, we got a guy that works with a couple of our players and seems to be all right. So Barry called me and asked me to come out there. So I went. And I think a big part of my success, and I think I just said something on LinkedIn about this, the A's not only let me do my job, Jeff, they helped me do my job. So, everybody claims about autonomy. Oh, let me do my thing. And they did. But at the same time, they also helped me do my thing. And that doesn't happen very often. So somebody asked me today.
Yeah.
Huh?
No, it doesn't happen very often.
No, hell no. So what happened was, the way I explained it was, Barry Weinberg is a perfect example. So now I'm with adults. I'm in the big leagues. I mean, there's a culture there, just like the NFL, just like the NBA. There's a certain way you act within those sports. Every sport's got its personality and culture.
Right.
Barry Weinberg was a guy that I say was in those jungle movies that you and I used to watch as kids, that would walk ahead and cut the vines down with a machete so we could walk. That's what he did for me.
Yeah.
So when people say, hey, what would you do differently, if you ever went back to the A's, and what do you remember failing, and what did you do? And I thought for a second, honestly, and I didn't want to sound arrogant, but I said, I wouldn't do anything different. And I didn't make any mistakes. And the reason why I didn't is they didn't allow me to. I mean, I don't know anywhere. So I'm trying to pay it forward like that. When somebody says to me, Coach, I screwed up, I always say, hey, don't worry about that. Let me take that. We'll fix that. I didn't break anybody's leg. Nobody died. Let's just, you whatever, right? And so that's what they did for me. And so not only was that great, the whole staff embraced me. And that was because of Tony La Russa.
Uh-huh.
Tony La Russa, the first time we met, and And, he said, hey, welcome to the ball club. We were at Fan Fest, right? You have every year the team goes out and has a big thing like in January, get everything going in the city and everywhere in the big leagues. And I met him. That's how I met him. He was signing autographs. He goes, hey, man, nice to meet you. And, you going to really help us out, I think. Oh, yes, sir. Okay, good. But what he did was he told everybody and even told me, look, you're a pro or you wouldn't be here. So I don't usually say anything unless there's something going on. So unless you hear from me, otherwise, just do your thing. That was it.
Right.
Use your Hall of Famer saying, go do it. It's just phenomenal. And the PS to that story too, when I was with the A's, I know it sounds funny, but I'm going to tell you, when I was with the A's, I never had one person from the president, owner, all the way down to the hitting coach tell me, no, we can't do that. Or that's the wrong thing to do. Not once.
Yeah.
Did whatever I wanted to and how I wanted. And, that's the way it should be. And if you fail, then you need to account for that. And if that means you lose your job, this is the way it goes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I did there. Now, what did I do? What did I bring there? Well, first thing I didn't bring was the ability to train athletes on the day that they play. You and I, I don't know if you did that there, but we play every day, right? Play about 210 games in, let me think if I figure this out. No, let's just make that 180 games in 200 days, including spring training. So I'd never had anybody lift weights on the day that they played. And, some guys like to lift before because it gets them hyped up and nervous system going. Or some guys want to save all that, play the game, and lift after. So I had to acquiesce to those preferences and figure out, what do I do? The one thing I came up with was volume, right? All they do every day is they play catch, they run, they throw, they field, they swing. Every day is the same thing. And that's a lot of work. And then they're out there, American League, 3 hours playing. Now, the commissioner is now trying to speed that up. But anyway, they're out there all day. So last thing they want to do at, 10 o'clock at night, after being out there for 3 hours, is come in and lift for an hour. So a couple things I did. One, I decided we're going to lift heavy, and we're going to drop the reps to 5 and under. And we're going to go as heavy as we can. So I took 2 months at 3s, 2 months at 2s, and the last 2 months at 1s. Give me your best one, whatever it is. And then I said, we have programs from 2 to 6 times a week, however you want to do it. So, for instance, if somebody said 2 is good enough for me, here's my schedule. You want to put some things in there, okay? But if you're a guy that really wanted to lift, it just wasn't practical after the game. So I just divided it up into back, chest, arms, legs. Sometimes I divide legs into anterior, posterior. And said we'll just do one body part. So say if it was chest day, it was the guy who picked that sort of workout. We come in and do flat bench and incline, out the door. Be done in 8-9 minutes.
Yeah.
Get warm, go hard, go home. And we made a living that way. And that was pitchers too. We were squatting heavy. We were doing everything like that. And, you realize that was the same thing you and I had already done. It was just under different conditions, right? Like we wouldn't be doing all kinds of reps in season, doing 8s and 10s and 12s and all that. It's ridiculous. And you certainly wouldn't be doing that if you're going to go out and play after that. So I just thought, well, we're just going to reduce this thing down to nothing, turn it from 1 RMs into just max efforts, which at the end of the year, you might be getting one hard rep, but it may be only 85 to 90% of your best, but that's all you got 6 months later, right? But it's the full effort I like because ain't nobody pulling a hamstring at 80%. They're going as hard as they can, tired or not, and that's when problems happen. So that's really what I changed. And then when I went to that, and then I came out of that back into college, I just brought that with me and thought, this is a great idea. It really worked. And I know it worked because if there's anybody that it would have resulted adversely, it would have been baseball because they were playing every day and nothing happened. Nothing. The only thing that happened was good. We reduced our injuries. The guys kept playing. They were available.
Well, it's interesting to me. It seems like they spend a good 20, 30 minutes on shoulder prehab now and shoulder mobility and, of course, rotary torso work. And core strengthening, and then of course some degree of work for the primary muscle groups. But that's kind of what I see in a nutshell for baseball these days. But
I've had some baseball guys tell me, coming from teams saying they ought to just, forget the weight program, just hire a masseuse because it really ain't doing anything. And then, that's a whole different story, right? I mean, listen to this. So we got all this technology. You got your biomechanist, your sports science guy, your strength coach, your massage therapist, got all this technology, all these metrics. And the injury rate hasn't changed a bit.
Yeah.
You tell me what's wrong with that. I mean, the machine, it's not the machine's fault. You just turn it on. It tells you these numbers. It's the practitioner. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, it's definitely got worse. So
yeah, like how did that happen?
Out there, a lot of injuries. Yeah,
you got machines now that can tell the future damn near, and then you can't get that. Yeah, hey, I will tell you something. If I ever get back into baseball, I'm gonna fix it all by myself. You mark it down at whatever time it is right now. I said it.
I hear you. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I guess you could say, the younger people. The collegiate athletes. What character traits did you feel were important? And regarding those traits, how did you feel like you were impactful in, let's say, developing the younger athletes, maybe in some programs at NC State, or it's always been interesting to me is to look at some of the things. Of course, we can look at a lot of different character traits, but to me, it all came down to maybe 2 or 3 things for a lot of these athletes to be successful. What are your feelings there?
I'd say that we were a lot more impactful in the 80s than we are now. I mean, I feel like, I still get text messages, emails, phone calls from kids I coached at UCLA. I mean, a lot of them have been now lifelong friends. I was coaching their kids. At some point they'd say, "Hey, my daughter's doing this or my son's doing that. Coach, you gotta help me out." I just received a LinkedIn message from James Washington, who was a Super Bowl MVP for the Cowboys one year. He was our safety. He said, "Coach, I need somebody that cares about my best interest. I need to get healthy again." I haven't talked to him in 30 years. I've seen him. We've seen each other on Facebook. So I know in my case that I think the way you talk about impactful is you say you're a bigger part of their life. That's why I really have told kids, like if that's what you want to do, if that's how you want to be thought of, and that's how I think that I did my best job, I was able to become more than a strength coach. I was a confidant and a friend, at whatever level, a 30-year-old could be to an 18-year-old. They trusted me. I tell them, I don't think college is the place. Go to high school where you can start influencing them right away. I mean, to the degree that somebody asked me the other day, what's the basis of your program? Give me a couple of things that you can point to.
Yeah.
And I remember the last time somebody asked me that, I said, well, number one, you can start with please and thank you. That's the way I look at it, right? I just see that's a big deal to me because you don't see it as much. And now look, things have changed, and you can talk about kids communicating or not. But when we were kids, you had to talk. There was no other way to do it, right? You had to look at somebody and talk to them. And sometimes that's not easy, but you do it and you grow and you stretch and you learn. But now they don't have to talk; they can just text. So they've really lost the art of communication. And I'm not telling you anything new. You can just ask the scientists that. They'll tell you, the social scientists will tell you that's a big part of how these kids have grown up, good, bad, or indifferent. That's the thing. And so you become a little bit more of a figure than you are a human, almost, so I think that's the piece. But But what I have found, and I've been lucky to be around, those 10 years at UCLA, I mean, holy cow, Jeff, Jackie Joyner, Troy Aikman, Kobe Jones, those kids I all coached,
Yeah.
One thing about them is Reggie Miller, these guys. I mean, one thing about them is they were passionate and committed, right? I mean, there's no other way to say it.
Right.
And I think we've all seen that videotape of Nick Saban saying, I think people think there's lots of ways to be great, and there really isn't. And the answer to that is there really isn't. There's just
right.
There's only a few things that you need to do, and if you don't do them, then it is what it is, and you're not going to make it. And those guys, they busted their butts, man. They did a great job, and they were intent. They were great in school. I remember back in those days. Now there was no rules, right, Coach? I mean, these guys were, if they weren't in class, they were watching film and they were working out. They didn't have any 20 hours. I mean, hell, these guys reached 20 hours by Wednesday, Coach. You know that. But that's one thing they were. And again, looking back, they were good. They were good people, and they're still good people. They have good families. You never hear anything about them. I mean, it's just one of those things. They just, be a good person. That's a good start. So that's what I found. I mean, I again, their passion for the sport has to be there, or you're just not going to make it in that sport. And so that being one of the traits that I think you're automatically committed to just outworking everybody. If you're that passionate, you're just, you're like me, I come home from baseball practice, I'm throwing the tennis ball against the garage and fielding it, or I'm throwing it against the curb, I'm throwing it up and hitting it and running. Well, I didn't hit it too far, but running 100 feet and going to pick it up and hit it again. I mean, that's what you do. That's what I found with these kids. Now, I think some of these kids are still driven and committed. But one of the things that I find with the recent generations, and I was told this by one of the vice presidents at Santa Barbara in 2006 or 7, whatever. Like, he was telling me that he's got moms and dads calling his office saying, "Hey, is there any way you can take my son or my daughter through registration? They're just having a hard time."
Yeah.
What? And he ended up saying no. And why is he ended up saying, like, well, why is that? And he wrote like a paper on it, and I got to find it. You make me think about that. He said, here's the problem. Some of these kids aren't even allowed to fall down.
Yeah.
Like, somebody's there to watch them. But even worse than that, when they do fall down, they're not even allowed to get up on their own. Here, let me help you. Oh gosh, like, be careful. And I don't know about you, but you better get up. I mean, there ain't nobody helping you. I mean,
yeah,
because our parents didn't do that. I mean, so I think that's a missed skill, and we see that these kids are flummoxed with the smallest of problems. Granted, there's no denying that the science says there's more stressors now than ever before, and I could see that. There's more distractions for sure with the technology. Still, I'd like to think that while my sons play video games and all that, and they leave their stuff laying around the house or they don't clean their dishes, I'm not cleaning them.
Yeah.
It's gonna be right there. Come here and clean them.
Yeah, and I don't know how much we can say about parasympathetic breathing, and I mean, it's okay. You learn how to do that, and it helps you. Okay, so what else can we do? What else can we do now to get into a parasympathetic state? I take a lot of things from the Marine Corps Warfighting Skills Manual. I really have a lot of parallels between athletics and the military, and I wrote a little book about that for my own enjoyment. But talking about that human dimension that's where I wanted to focus a lot of my efforts in developing athletes, is that the chief incalculable being the human will. and really understanding and believing that. And then, what are the commonalities and shortfalls of the collegiate football player, for instance, relative to character, consistency, and peculiarities? So when you look at those three things, which is something that I faced every year, with, okay, out of this 100 guys, I'm going to have 10% that are going to be troubled individuals. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But at the same time, I could always count on that. And one of the reasons I started the podcast, of course, is because I saw so many people go by the wayside and not graduate, not make it to their senior year, not being able to quit smoking marijuana, or not being able to quit drinking alcohol and get into some kind of trouble. And I mean, that's, I would like to think that we can save more people. But I don't know if it's going to come through parasympathetic breathing. I think that we have to become proactive, maybe as old coaches, and find a way to influence some of the younger people to, hey, maybe some of these things that we did way back when weren't that bad, So I still think you can improve toughness. Some people don't. But I have always believed that. But I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and Western Pennsylvania was a pretty rough place when it came to competitive athletics.
Right. But you make some great points. I mean, listen, you're not wrong. I just, there is coming from a liberal arts school. There's teaching strategies, right, that have been recognized. One of them was guided discovery.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to kind of infer what should be done, so I'm not going to do it for you though. And I think that's the piece that we're missing, and then when you have I just shudder at some of these things, now, parents and kids, they don't go to the coach. They go right to the president of the school. I can't tell you how many times we've been called in. Hey, you get an email from a mom,
yeah,
and from the president's office, can you guys handle this, please? I mean, at first you just kind of like, oh my goodness, that's the last thing I want the president. But it ain't abnormal, And when you have that, again, kids are great minds. They're gonna kind of echo the sentiments of their parents, right? A little bit. So, if a child sees that, thinks that's, I just need to jump over everybody until somebody tells me yes. That's not life.
Yeah.
That's not how it really is. And so we're really doing them a disservice. Everybody thinks, oh, this is great, we're helping them out. No, you're not. That's not helpful at all. In fact, I think some child psychologists will tell you it's one of the more insidious abuses of children, right, is doing everything for them, give them everything, help them up, give them all, let them, the way they talk, the way they walk, what clothes they wear, and all. I mean, they need guidance, and I'm glad look, I think there's probably some things that I know my parents did that, if somebody found out, they might be in trouble now, right? But I mean, I think a lot of folks end up, living by the ruler or whatever was available to hit you in the behind and let you know that, hey, you need to kind of go this way and not that way. But I think you're totally right. I mean, that was very articulate how you define that out and what you said. And I think if we just can all imagine, making it enable these kids to critically think. So if I'm in a situation where I'm saying, all right, here's what I want you guys to do. Now, I know I'm a good speaker. I know I speak clear and without ambiguity. So when I say, here's what I want to do, give me 5 of those, give you 30 seconds rest, whatever like that. Get ready. And somebody goes, wait a minute, can you say that again? I say, no, ask the guy next to you. Yeah. If that's my little contribution, then good for me. So
Right.
anyway.
Well, I wanted to mention also that you had, I think you had a sports science position with Powerlift.
Yeah.
And, what kind of, did you see any progress there while you were there with, equipment or program design that was significant?
Not really. So here's how that happened, Jeff. And for all those folks out there who don't know it, Jeff Connor with
Yeah.
an E, Jeff Connor with an E owns Powerlift.
Right.
So, there's been a couple of times where I know I called you and you're like, wrong Jeff. Oh, God darn it. Sorry.
Yeah, they sent me his bar bill one time, and I did not want that bill. I guess.
Oh, man, that's something you don't want. Oh, good Lord. Oh, man, that's a funny story. I'm going to tell that. I'm going to steal it from you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I was tied to ACC basketball at NC State, I mean that's where my bread was getting butter, even though I ran the whole department. And so when that coach was fired, I had about 3 months left I had a contract, so they fired them, but I was still going through the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And so I was out of a job for a little bit, and I thought, what am I going to do next? And so this was 2016, 17, and so I called around, so, like we would do, called some equipment companies, some athletic businesses, and, private businesses and all those things. And, Jeff Connor, my whole room was Powerlift, except for I had a few machines that I bought from Tommy Profit at Hammer Strength.
Right.
And who I was really good friends with. And as the story goes, I called him first and said, hey, Tommy, I'm looking for a spot. He said, man, we just had a big restructure here. We let about 40 guys go. Bobby, I don't have anything, And I said, okay. I said, well, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to call Jeff Connor and ask him the same thing. I just want you to know that so you don't get upset. He's like, no, you should. Go ahead and be good for you. So I called Jeff. Basically, what I told him was, I'm not interested in selling. I don't feel comfortable, at least at that time, I don't feel comfortable asking my friends to buy stuff from me. I just don't feel comfortable. Now, what I can do is act as the conduit between you and the strength coach. I know you guys have, how Powerlift is one of the top 3 for sure. A lot of people, but when you got new customers and, I'll be kind of that interpreter and go between, I speak that, but sports science was starting to grow in 2016. I said, why don't you make me a sports science coordinator? I'll form a group of guys and women that are called the Powerlift Sports Science Educational Board. And so that'll be a service to your customers. So you could say, hey, Jeff, at ECU, you bought this equipment, you paid whatever it is. You also have access to the best scientists in this country and maybe in the world, So like Andy Fry would be a guy that, if you have any questions about exercise physiology, give Andy Fry a call. It's free of charge. It's part of the whole deal. So I put that together with those guys and ended up kind of having a thing on that that magazine, Simply Faster, that I ended up putting up a Powerlift tab on Simply Faster. And we did a little bit. I mean, it was tough, because, granted, Jeff was having a hard time figuring out how the return on investment was right there because really, you can't really calculate that. And so I did that for a couple of years. It was good. I mean, I really liked it. I liked traveling around, I liked staying in the business, got to see all my friends and got to get, 10 really good scientists on board that were going to write articles for us. And they did. And, but they did have, Jeff, a laser. Did you ever see their laser?
I did not.
So they had a laser that was probably 6.5 feet tall, and it was on a post. And then it came out. There was a readout right here. It had watts and velocity and load and everything on it. And the laser was in here. So when you lifted, the weight would go. The laser would pick up the weight going up and down. Problem was that it also picked up everything else. So you had to, so like the lasers were facing out this way. You're facing me. I'm on the platform facing it. And the So the laser was here, and then the board was there where you could see it. So I like the immediate feedback, right? You can look at it right away. Some of these things you got to wait for a second or so. It wouldn't have to do that with this. Just lift it, boom, lift it, boom, lift it, boom. But then if you walk by it, it might say, power output of, 1 million or something. I don't know. But like, God damn it. Hey, don't get out of my way. I'm getting my lift on. And so he ended up giving me 10 of those. I liked them, but they weren't going to make any more. He just felt like it, he's a good businessman. So he knew that there wasn't anything really in for him. But I'm still, as you look around, think about it. There's not a lot of equipment companies that sell to strength and conditioning coaches.
Yeah.
With veteran strength and conditioning coaches on their staff. I think it seems funny to me.
Yeah.
But
when I was in Carolina, I invented a plate-loaded hip flexor machine that Stoney Albert helped me with, put a prototype together, and it would hook into the rack, and you had a pad, and you could plate load it and do hip flexion.
Really?
And yeah.
So what'd you do with it?
Well, that was my only invention. And yeah, that was it. It just, I wasn't going to try to spend a bunch of money and get a patent and all that kind of stuff. But
gotcha.
And it was pretty heavy. We would have had to try to make it lighter because you had to pick it up and stick it into the rack. But nobody was doing anything for hip flexion. And I was like, well, you have that little 4-way hip machine.
Yeah. Yep.
You could rotate around. But I wanted to make it something plate loaded that was just for flexion that you could fit into the rack. So that was my little brainstorm.
Well, that's one more thing that you built than I did. I didn't have any inventions. Shoot, I stole them. That's cool. That's really cool.
When I first even learned about strength training, one of my dad's assistant coaches that played way back for West Virginia, he played for Pappy Lewis. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
But he took me to one of the first. There was a chiropractor. He said, "I'm going to take you to this special place today. You're not going to believe it." He took me in there, and there was a full line of Nautilus in there. And,
really?
Oh yeah. And so one of the people took me through the machines. I don't know. I was about in 9th grade or something. And of course, I got sick. I didn't throw up, but I was like, "Whoa, man!" That was like the first time I ever lifted weights.
Oh, geez, and they buried you.
Yeah, so that was my introduction to strength training, and then of course, I had with actually in Tennessee, I managed a Nautilus gym, but also had a powerlifting team at that time as well. I was powerlifting.
Okay.
But we would go through that Nautilus every Saturday, me and a couple guys, and try to kill each other, of course, and all that kind of stuff. Every body part, and throw up and do force reps and negative only in the whole 9 yards. And then, of course, I visited the land once or twice and got into that whole thing with variable resistance. Concept, and and then so I had I like kind of like the combination of both, but then over time you couldn't even find I'd like to know if there's a Nautilus machine anywhere today.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, like the old ones. I mean, there may be a couple of the second or third generation ones that were a little more modern, but that's what we had in the sports medicine center in 80. Whatever, 2 or 3 when I first started. They had a full line. I don't know if they had 2 of everything. They didn't have 2, but they had 1 of everything. So they had the giant leg press that takes up about 2 rooms. The combo leg press and the combo chest machine. Like, holy cow! Oh yeah. I mean, listen, it's resistant, man. Dudes were getting big and stronger on it. That's all I know.
Well, those guys, the guys at Penn State, of course, they hung their hat on it. Michigan for many years, I mean, there were several programs throughout the country. I mean, I used to get a kick out of listening to Ken Manny, defend that program at a conference and, get into arguments with people, the free weight people.
Oh, man. I mean, those guys were fervent, man. But what's funny is that as time went on, I mean, I hadn't really checked with a lot of those places Ken Manny and I are really close friends now, but
Yeah.
They started having hybrid programs. They started squatting and cleaning and everything. Now they still kind of stayed with the machine sort of thought of, the failure and force reps and all that, but it's quicker. But if you look at Dan Riley, he did that at the Skins for so long.
Yeah.
But you and I would both agree. That program ain't easy.
Well, no, and when Chet Furman left Penn State, I went and interviewed up there with Paterno, but I walked through the room and I was like, you couldn't even move because there were so many machines. There weren't any free weights, and I was like, Coach, I'd like to lie to you and tell you I'm a machine guy, but I'm not. But
Wow, so it was that many machines, huh?
Oh yeah, it was stacked, wall to wall.
Wow.
And I don't know if I even saw a barbell. There may have been some somewhere, but I didn't see them. But anyway, that was an interesting experience. But we got about 6 or 7 more minutes, and I just wanted to I wanted to ask you this before we close. Looking at the last position that you had and your title and so forth. Did you have more time to invest into the mental and physical health of the athletes? And I had Pat Ivy on last week, and we talked a whole lot about restoration. And I visited Ohio State recently and saw their force plates and all the things that they're doing for restoration. So the float tanks and all that kind of stuff. So things have definitely moved in that direction. Everybody wearing an Aura ring to make sure they're cognizant of sleep and sleep variability. And so, how did you kind of transition into that position, and what did you focus on there?
Well, so it wasn't too long after I got on. I mean, I'm not saying it was weeks, but it was a few months, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So what really happened was an opportunity to do something that I thought I might not have done if I wasn't called on to make some difficult decisions, right? So, I became the COVID coordinator, and so I was the department coordinator and liaison to the president's office. So I ended up being on all those LA County Department of Public Health private calls and all the way through. If you remember, Los Angeles was really kind of the Wuhan of North America, right? I mean, there was no bigger problem than Los Angeles, where our school was. I mean, it was unbelievable. Well, the connection is that they had government money that they were giving out that was COVID related. If you needed that, so there were some things that we were able to do, and in other words, we bought, I don't even know how many softballs, because they were hitting the balls. And then at that time, early on, they're wiping them off. Practice would last like 6 hours. Like I said, well, we can't do that. That's ridiculous. So we bought hundreds of balls. That's that sort of thing. But the one thing that we were able to decide upon is we end up hiring for 2 years until the money wasn't available, a clinical psychologist with sports psychology certification. So, it was fantastic. Now, the school also has, like every school, right, a counseling program. But I mean, I think at the time, they only had about 8 full-time counselors for 30,000 students. You can imagine how that worked out.
Yeah.
The good news for us was that, we did have one liaison from campus counseling, but, for at least a year, there was nobody else on campus except the athletes. I mean, the athletes came first, because we had such a small group, and we were able to really focus on how to keep these kids healthy. That there's no way that you're going to check every single student coming into the room and all that. So we were there for a year before anybody showed up, it seemed like.
Right.
But that I think of all the things I've done in my career, it's probably the best administrative move I've ever made. I mean, so and again, using the term the PS to the story, we ended up hiring a guy by the name of Ross Flowers, who at the time was working with the Lakers, had been at UC Davis, and had worked with the Olympic team. Unknowingly, I didn't know he was in Beijing when I was there. The other part is I coached Ross Flowers at UCLA. He was a hurdler for us. I had no idea. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know that he was a psychologist. As soon as I found that out, I called him right away, really asking, "Hey, do you know anybody?" But then when I started looking at his resume, like, holy cow, this is the guy. In fact, partway through his hire with us, the Lakers pulled him away from us and took him into the bubble. And he got himself a big ring and cigar at the end of that deal. So he was a good one. So, when you talk about what we did, let's step a little bit back when I first got in. And this is, even though it's at the forefront right now, there's no way that this should happen. So I sat down with a gal who's from kinesiology, who's a sports psychology PhD, not a licensed clinical psychologist, but had her PhD in sports psychology. So we end up buying her out for 20 hours a year, or 20 hours a year. Yeah. And per week, per semester. And we sat down and I said, well, I know you're part of this thing. I know you've been helping out. I'm interested in what you're doing. I've never really been around sports psychology. I've seen it everywhere, but talk to me about it. And so she explained, this is what we do, imaging and talk to people, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But then I said to her, and so do you guys offer any programs? Is it one-on-one? Yeah, we do some one-on-one, but we also try to do some group stuff. And I said, oh, great. She goes, well, really, what happens is every fall we try to get everybody together. And, of course, it's not mandatory. And we tell the coaches, hey, we want to meet with your team. And I said, oh, good. And she said, well, the coaches didn't make it mandatory. So we had, at best, poor attendance, because the coaches said, hey, this is another thing you guys can go to, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Well, if you tell kids that, they're going to say, oh, heck with it then.
Right.
So I told her right then and there, I said, well, we're going to change that. She said, what do you mean? I said, it's now mandatory. We're going to do it mandatory, fall mandatory check-in. She's like, wow, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm just going to tell everybody that's what we're doing. That's my job. And that's what Mike Izzy, our athletic director, is going to allow me to do. Who would turn that away? Especially during some of this health crisis thing. So what they ended up doing was mandatory. Every team comes in, no coaches. Right? Just the psychologists and them, campus psychology, clinical, her on the sports side, coordinating all that with the director of sports medicine. So they end up, having the first mandatory thing in my first whatever months. And they had an assessment to fill out. And through that assessment, it's a good thing they did that, because it was the kind of assessment where you'd say, okay, we have somebody that needs help. But part of that was we have somebody in crisis right now.
Yeah.
And I think they ended up walking, 2 people, walking them. They had to have somebody with them, walk them up to campus because they were in crisis and needed help immediately. So I wish it wasn't that way, but thank goodness, we ended up doing that. And then we turned that, Jeff, into mandatory QPR training, which is suicide prevention.
Right.
For everybody, not just kids. So I just piled it on and thought, all you got to do is read the paper. I mean, you can say whatever you want about stressors and kids, and this is what's happening. We got to address this. So we did, and I think it's the best administrative move I've ever made. And thank goodness for Mike Izzy co-signing that thing. And I think the question was, how are they going to let this happen? And I just said to myself, you think they want this on their hands, finding out that they had a chance to do this and they didn't, and something happened? No way. So that's how we did that. So I'm glad you asked me that, because that doesn't get asked often to me, and it reminds me that how important those things are for this reason. If you talk to Ross Flowers or any sports psychologist, you'll find out that he said, most of the time, not being able to throw the ball back to the pitcher, or missing free throws, or you can't kick the ball through the uprights, usually is a clinical issue. It just shows itself up on the field of athletics. And I thought, wow, I didn't even think about that. So I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few, not many, but a few come into my office over 30 some years, and talk about suicide. And, you're happy they came to talk to you, and then you got to get them to the right people, of course.
Yeah.
And then, when I went and worked for 2nd, 3rd Battalion for about 7 months after I retired, we had to go through, I think it was, like almost 2 full days of suicide prevention education. And because in the military, it's like some incredible number of people. If you consider all the veterans, current military people, it's like, maybe 25 a day or something like that. I mean, it's
I've heard the same thing. Yes, sir.
Numbers. Yeah.
Sad. Well, you can't prevent it, but it's amazing how, I think when you and I were growing up, you would never mention it because you were scared to say it. And then come to find out the real way to do it is to ask somebody straight up, are you thinking about killing yourself?
Yeah.
I would have never thought that. But I was informed and educated and around some really good people. So I'm happy we did it.
Well, Bob, I'm going to pursue this mission, and I might get back with you because you've got a whole lot of insight, and you've had a tremendous career, and I've got a ton of respect for you and all you've accomplished in strength and conditioning. And, I hope I see you sometime at the conferences again. And I'm still going to try to be active and keep my certifications up for a little while.
You should. People benefit from you. You've affected a lot of lives, Jeff. There's no reason to stop. I mean, the last chapter in our book isn't written yet, brother. I promise you that.
I got you. I like that. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show, Bob, and hopefully we'll get together again. And God bless. And we'll see everybody next week on Absolute Empowerment with Jeff Connors. Thanks a lot.
God bless you.
You've been listening to Absolute Empowerment with Coach Jeff Connors on The Sports Objective. Join us every Monday night for a new edition of the show. Listen to the show pretty much everywhere podcasts are found. Be sure to follow us on social media at The Sports OBJ on Twitter and TikTok, at The Sports Objective on Instagram. Like and follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, we appreciate you listening to the show. And go Pirates!